Hello all my YouTube friends, it is Avery back again with another Preptober video to help you guys prepare for NaNoWriMo. In my last couple of videos we have looked at outlining methods that are popular among pantsers, and today we are going to be looking at the hero's journey, a very popular outlining method among plantsers, someone who is halfway between a pantser and a plotter. Now I just want to make it clear here that the hero's journey outlining method is not specific to fantasy novels or stories that contain some kind of hero. The hero's journey can apply to any novel at all. It can work for thrillers, crime novels, horrors, romance, anything. Whatever kind of protagonist your story has, the hero's journey works the same. So if you saw my last video, you'll know that the plot roller coaster is represented with a line that starts off low, then progressively gets higher and higher until it reaches the climax of the story, followed by a dramatic decrease in action before finally coming to an end. The hero's journey, on the other hand, is represented by a circle. I suppose to signify that, to some extent, stories always come full circle. History repeats itself, and a lot of stories will end roughly in the same place that they began. It begins similarly to the plot roller coaster in that the starting point of the hero's journey is the ordinary world. This is basically a brief introduction to the story's protagonist and a glimpse into what their ordinary life is like before the events of the novel begin. Next we have the call to adventure, also known as the inciting incident. This is whatever happens that sets in motion the main plot of the novel. What is it that initially takes the protagonist away from their normal life and puts them on the path to love, danger, or adventure? Then we have the refuse the call. Adventures? Oh no, we don't want any adventures around here. Nasty, disturbing, uncomfortable things make you late for dinner. The protagonist will initially try to avoid the adventure, opting instead to stick with their normal, comfortable life, but they will inevitably give in and go where the adventure takes them because if they didn't, the novel would be very boring. Next we have Meet the Mentor. The protagonist meets somebody who is going to help them learn something. This could be a literal mentor who teaches the protagonist how to fight. It could be a friend who teaches the protagonist to come out of their shell. It could be a love interest who teaches them about their own romantic inclinations. Someone who is going to teach the protagonist a valuable life lesson. Then there is crossing the first threshold. This is where the protagonist leaves their comfort zone and the plot of the novel really begins. Maybe the protagonist doesn't even embark on the journey of their own free will. Perhaps they are forced into it. But however it happens, our protagonist has taken their first step on a path that will change their life forever. Following that is tests, allies, and enemies. Pretty much every novel is going to have some form of conflict somewhere along the way, and this is where the conflict really begins. The protagonist will face a test, something that is preventing them from obtaining their goals. Along the way, they will find allies that will help them reach their goals, and also enemies that will try to stop them. Then we have approach to the innermost cave. This is where the end is in sight and the protagonist sees a way to achieve their goal. They have a plan and they are putting it in action. Then we have the ordeal. This is the first main conflict of the novel, the part where the soldiers go into battle, the criminals try to pull off the big heist, the rookie boxer goes up against the world champion, and the shy teenage girl goes to the prom with the popular jock, the part of the novel that all the events so far have been building up to. Then we have the reward. Our hero finally wins. They have overcome all the obstacles and they have finally achieved the goal that they have been reaching for throughout the entire novel. The battle has been won, the treasure has been found, our love interests finally get their first kiss. Next we have the road back. Now that the adventure is over, our protagonist is ready to return home to their normal life. But it's not quite that simple. Now we see the consequences of the previous act. The enemy is rallying their forces and they are hot on the hero's tail, and an even bigger conflict is about to occur. Now we get to the resurrection. This is the ultimate conflict of your novel. The biggest battle the heroes have ever fought in, the fastest police chase that the getaway driver has ever driven, the biggest argument that the lovers have ever had, the climax that will determine how your story is going to end. And finally, the return with the elixir. The journey is over, the hero returns home, but they return with something more than what they had before. It could be something tangible, like a treasure, or a magical artifact, or even a lover. It could be a lesson that the protagonist has learnt. It could just be that despite all odds, the protagonist has survived where others have not. Whatever it is, the ending of the novel makes it clear to the readers that the events of the novel have changed the protagonist's life in some capacity. So let's once again look at an example of an existing story to see how the hero's journey works in practice. I'd say Star Wars A New Hope follows the hero's journey pretty well. First, we have our ordinary world. Luke Skywalker is a regular moisture farmer on the boring planet of Tatooine, where he dreams of excitement and adventure. Then the call to adventure. Luke is cleaning R2-D2 when he accidentally finds the secret recording from Princess Leia saying, "Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi, you're my only hope." Luke talks to an old man named Ben Kenobi, and Ben explains that he is actually a Jedi Knight, a hero tasked with keeping the peace in the Republic. He also explains that Luke's father was a Jedi and gives Luke his father's old lightsaber. Then the refusal of the call. Obi-Wan offers to take Luke with him to Alderaan and train him to use the Force and become a Jedi like his father. Luke initially declines the offer. He has a home, he has a family, he can't just abandon them, but he changes his mind when he discovers that stormtroopers have murdered his aunt and uncle. Meet the mentor. I guess the events of the hero's journey are a little out of order in this instance. Luke has already met his mentor. It's Obi-Wan. He's going to teach him to use the Force. Then we cross the first threshold. Luke hops on a land speeder and travels to Mos Eisley with Obi-Wan and the droids, leaving his old life behind and beginning his new one. Then, tests, allies and enemies. Obi-Wan hires our allies, Han and Chewie, to take them to Alderaan in the Millennium Falcon. But the enemies, the stormtroopers, are hot on their tail and they only just manage to get away. Then we get to the innermost cave. The Death Star captures the Millennium Falcon with a tractor beam, and the heroes are forced to confront the enemy. The team splits up, Obi-Wan goes to disable the tractor beam, and Luke, Han and Chewie go to rescue Princess Leia. Now we get to the ordeal. While Luke is busy rescuing Leia, Obi-Wan faces off against Darth Vader, and in the end he sacrifices himself so that Luke and the others can escape. The reward is that Princess Leia has been rescued, but also our heroes now have the schematics to the Death Star, something that can completely change the outcome of the rebellion. The road back. Our heroes drop Leia off at the rebel base, they collect their reward, Han and Chewie leave, and Luke is free to go on his merry way. But that isn't what happens. Luke has been taken in by the cause, and he agrees to join the rebels and assist them in a desperate, last-ditch attack on the Death Star. Then the resurrection, the final conflict of the story. The X-Wing squad attacks the Death Star, Han and Chewie return to help out, Luke finally taps into his Force powers and uses them to blow up the Death Star. And finally, the return of the elixir. The Death Star is destroyed, our heroes are victorious, a big ceremony is held to celebrate. Princess Leia gives medals of heroism to Luke and Han, and none for poor Chewie. Bitch. Now, while this outlining method is very popular, it is less reliable than the plot roller coaster in that not every story is going to follow this pattern. Refusing the call, for example. Not every protagonist is going to refuse the call. Some protagonists love the call. They cannot wait to leave their old boring lives behind and begin their adventure. The ordeal and the resurrection also doesn't apply to every story. Not every story has two large-scale conflicts. A lot of stories only have one main conflict. Still, the hero's journey outlining method is a tried and tested classic and has the potential to work extremely well for your novel. So your homework for today, think about the hero's journey plotting method. Think about the story that you have in mind for NaNoWriMo, and think about whether or not your story could work using the hero's journey as an outline. If you think it could work, then give it a go. Think about all 12 of the main plot points of the hero's journey. The ordinary world, the call to adventure, the refusal of the call, meeting the mentor, crossing the first threshold, tests, allies and enemies, the approach to the innermost cave, the ordeal, the reward, the road back, the resurrection, and the return with the elixir. Then, thinking about all the events that you want to take place in your novel, write down a brief summary of what's going to occur in all 12 of these plot points. In tomorrow's video, we are going to be looking at another plotting method called the Save the Cat beat sheet, a more complex method that I would recommend for more casual plotters and plantsers with plotter-leaning tendencies. We will be taking a close look at its structure and seeing if this plotting method could potentially work well for the novel that you are planning. So that's it for today. As always, please don't forget to like the video if you liked it and subscribe if you want to see more. Feel free to leave a comment letting me know what you think of the hero's journey. Have you ever used this outline before and how well did it work for you? But until tomorrow, it's ta-ta and farewell.